Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, it's the scandal that continues to dog the Royal Bank of Scotland. Many small companies have complained bitterly of their treatment at the hands of the state-owned bank. RBS has always maintained any problems were due to past management mistakes. But Channel 4 News has been speaking to one company who says those problems continued under the current leadership of RBS. And a secret recording reveals an RBS employee telling the company that the bank's tough line was down to decisions made by the Treasury, even though the government has always said it did not run RBS on a day-to-day basis. Our business editor, Siobhan Kennedy, is in central London. Siobhan.
John, well, for years now we've reported on the global restructuring group inside GRG and the alleged mistreatment of small businesses inside that unit. And every time we have, as you said, the Treasury's always said it can't comment, that it runs RBS as an arm's length investment. And every time we've gone to the chief executives, the former boss, Stephen Hester, and the current boss, Ross McEwen, they've almost dismissed GRG as a legacy issue, something to be dealt with from the past. Well, tonight, in the film we're about to show you, it's clear that far from being arm's length, in fact, the Treasury was much more hands-on than it appeared to want to show. And the business that we feature says that its bad treatment continued to occur under the current management of Ross McEwen. Put those two facts together, John, and it's clear that the crisis of GRG continues.
Bywaters Recycling. This is a family-run business that separated the paper from the plastic for nearly 100 years. But in the aftershock of the financial crisis, it found its bank, RBS, had left it to the bin marked rubbish. It was consigned to the bank's global restructuring group, GRG, a unit accused of driving viable firms out of business to turn a quick profit.
It was all about them squeezing more out of you, and you but really feeling like a slave when you're in that position. I mean, you do feel like jumping off a bridge. You know, where is the way out?
What happened next is textbook GRG history. For troubled firms, interest rates were hiked, management fees piled on, and property devalued. And this by the bank bailed out with public money.
This business, like many others, believe that RBS deliberately tried to push them under. But more than that, it now believes this could have been part of a larger strategy that the Treasury itself was aware of.
In May 2014, an RBS director came to Bywaters to tell them that the Treasury was forcing a restructuring and that Bywaters was being transferred from GRG to another division inside the bank for even riskier assets, the so-called bad bank. And that conversation was secretly recorded by Mr. Glover.
This asset, met that position, and that's why it was transferred in.
But the business is trading better than it ever has. But it's meeting its debts, it's meeting its obligations. I don't think it's a risk to the bank.
It wasn't a decision by the bank itself in terms of picking and choosing which assets went in. This has been imposed upon us to do this. So the Chancellor basically said to RBS that you have got to reduce your balance sheet, and you've got to reduce your balance sheet significantly.
But from that moment on, I realised that the Treasury and RBS were like one person. If you had a problem with RBS, you had a problem with the Treasury. If it was going to cost the Treasury money, you were basically put off.
Of course, this could be dismissed as one employee speaking out of turn, but others would say that taped conversation inside Bywaters sheds light on their suspicions. That rather than operating at an arm's length from RBS, as it always insisted it did, the Treasury appears to have been much more hands-on. In this instance, devising the very restructuring of the bank that ultimately saw Bywaters and thousands of other businesses like it dismissed as toxic debt to be disposed of. Something further revealed in these documents.
The RBS internal document reveals that the bank worked with the Treasury and its advisors to identify the high-risk assets to transfer to the bad bank. 3 apparently simple tests, which, if you met those criteria, meant you faced accelerated rundown. But why did the Treasury want the bank to do it? The document explains: to reduce capital requirements and accelerate improvement in profitability. RBS becoming profitable was the #1 goal of George Osborne, the Chancellor at the time, here standing shoulder to shoulder with the bank's boss, Ross McEwan, and presenting the bad bank as good news for small businesses.
I'm determined to deliver a banking system that works for the British economy. That means a new direction for RBS, dealing with the toxic assets of the past, becoming a British-focused bank, supporting small businesses like this.
Bywaters claims it saw none of that support. In fact, it says it found itself earmarked for sell-off, or worse, insolvency. Neil Mitchell knows how that feels. He also found himself cast off once RBS put his business, a software firm called Torex, into GRG. He spent years trying to expose the goings-on inside the unit and appealing to the Treasury for help. Now he's taken his case to the High Court, suing the bank for £128 million to compensate for his personal damages.
They clearly knew about GRG, and I find it horrific that in this day government ministers are still saying that we were always at all times at arm's length and that we did not know about GRG.
Why, though, would the Treasury want to ignore any of that?
Because if the true size and scale of this comes out, then it is a threat to the future of the bank, and it's also an exposure to the UK economy.
The Treasury told us the government rightly does not have a role in RBS's day-to-day operations. It said the regulator, the FCA, is currently reviewing RBS's treatment of business customers in financial difficulty, and it would be inappropriate for the government to comment further. But the ghosts of RBS past are beginning to worry MPs on the current influential Treasury Select Committee as well.
I think George Osborne is culpable. I mean, his bottom line was not sorting the bank or even looking at more closely at the mistakes the bank had made towards its customers. Osborne simply wanted the bank off the public books, and I think that created a climate where dangerous mistakes were made.
And that's a problem now for the current boss, Ross McEwan, not least because businesses like Bywaters are alleging mistreatment, which continued on his watch. In fact, Mr Glover says that he wrote both to Mr McEwan and the bank's then chairman, Sir Philip Hampton, but that they did nothing to help. And when Bywaters was earmarked to be passed to the RBS bad bank, it was Ross McEwan at the helm.
RBS says it firmly believes it provided extensive support to Bywaters while the company experienced financial difficulties. It said the increase in interest rates was normal practice and reflected the additional risk to the bank. It added that it acted properly and in good faith at all times in its dealings with the company. RBS admits publicly, though, that it didn't always treat customers inside GRG the right way. Yet lawyers say behind the scenes the bank isn't quite so magnanimous.
GRG is said to have disbanded. You know, we still have clients who are allegedly in GRG. They're corresponding with representatives from GRG. So it hasn't disappeared. And in terms of senior people at the bank, including Ross McEwan, then, you know, why are they spending taxpayers' money litigating these cases? Why aren't they sitting down trying to resolve them?
Bywaters is one such firm about to take its battle with RBS to court. It maintains that GRG made its situation much worse and says that once it broke free and joined HSBC, it returned to profitability within a year. Though the emotional strain took its toll.
You know, you forget about the things that happened to you. You know, you stopped eating. I think it was stressful. If there was a switch for off and on in life, you'd have been tempted to turn your life off.
You honestly felt like that?
Yeah, I did.
John Glover is convinced the legacy of GRG will live on and continue to haunt both RBS and the Treasury. He believes the bank must now come clean about the thousands of small businesses left on the scrap heap and the potential billions of pounds of compensation owed to them.
Now, John, RBS has set up a scheme to compensate small businesses that were inside GRG, but they're facing criticisms here too because they're running the scheme themselves and therefore they've left themselves open to accusations that they are playing both judge and jury on themselves. And Bywaters, that firm you saw there in my report, isn't even eligible to apply for the scheme because ironically it's now deemed to be too big and successful. That is why the Treasury Select Committee is pushing for an overhaul of the scheme to make it more independent. One final thought, John. The regulator, the FCA, has been promising a report on all these things about GRG for the past 3.5 years. And despite that, it's been 8 times delay and they still have not published it. And in response to my questions for this report tonight, John, they raised the spectre that they might never publish it.
Siobhan Kennedy in the City.
I've been getting